everyone, Jeff here again for VIP Vision. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to connect and configure a very basic VIP Vision intercom system consisting of a single door station and a single room station or monitor. Now we're going to be connecting these two devices together using a power over Ethernet switch, which is going to supply power and data to these devices. Once we've configured these two, or connected these two and configured them, we're then going to connect the power over Ethernet switch to a network router to give these devices internet access so that we can then access them via our phone. Now, everything that I do in this video is going to be shown on the SDB series of door station. It's worth noting that this will also work on the SVW series of stainless steel door stations, with the exception of this unit here not being power over Ethernet. Okay, so the stainless steel units must be powered via 12 volts. Everything that I go over here is also outlined in the user manual, which should have come with your VIP Vision intercom monitor or indoor station. If, however, it was missing, please download it from the VIP Vision website. Now, some prerequisites before we move on. You must, to complete this, have a laptop with an Ethernet port on it, okay, so a physical Ethernet port where we can connect an RJ45 socket. And I'm going to assume that your router is already configured for internet access and it works just fine with a laptop or another PC plugged in. Okay, let's jump into it. So I'm looking at the manual here at the moment, and section 2.2 goes over the settings that we're going to install in this video. So, one indoor monitor to one door station via a network switch. This configuration allows you to connect your indoor monitor and door station together and provide them with network access. The following is required for installation. Okay, so this is going to vary a little bit because we're using a power over Ethernet switch, but 12 volt DC power for both the door station and indoor monitor, we're going to skip that section because we're supplying power using the network switch. Cat5 cables to connect between the indoor monitor, door station and the network switch, and between the network switch and a Windows computer. A Windows computer for configuration. So as I outlined earlier, you must have a Windows-based PC to complete this installation. Please note that you cannot do this from Mac because you require Internet Explorer so that we can load the plugins for the door station. Okay, so moving on, you can see here the basic setup that we're going to run. Okay, so we're going to have the door station, and that's going to be plugged into our power over Ethernet switch here. The room station or indoor monitor is also going to be plugged into our power over Ethernet switch. And then we're going to connect our router to our power over Ethernet switch as well, which is then connected to the internet and is going to give us internet access so that we can then connect to this unit using a phone. Okay, in this example, we're going to connect the intercom door station and intercom monitor to a network switch and assign a static IP to both the door station and indoor monitor. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do in this demonstration. However, some of our IP addresses are going to be changed a little bit just due to the router that we have here. And you're going to run into this in the field as well. Not all of your devices are going to necessarily have an IP address in the correct range for the router that's on site. So in this case, we're going to be changing this to 192.168.8.110, and the master indoor monitor is going to be 192.168.8.109. We're going to set the subnet masks the same, so 255.255.255.0, and our gateway obviously is going to change as well to 192.168.8.1. We're going to leave everything else intact, so our VTO number, our door station number, is going to stay as default, and our room station is going to stay as default as well. Okay, so the next step is for us just to wire this up on the bench, and we'll go from there. So I've got everything laid out on the bench here. I'm going to jump across to another camera. Okay, so our power over Ethernet switch is here. First up though, we're going to have to connect the Ethernet and ancillary cables to these devices. I'm actually going to leave these cables out at the moment because I'm not supplying 12 volts DC to the devices, and I'm not planning on using a door strike in this demo. So I'm going to leave those out. Note that if you're not using a door strike and don't need to use 12 volts DC, you can also leave them out, but if you need either of those things, you must connect these cables. So I'm going to leave them aside for now, and we're just going to plug into the back of our door station and our monitor our Ethernet cables. So these little breakouts are just designed to make it a bit easier to mount these units to the wall so that you don't have to have an RJ45 socket at a right angle, which is easy to break. So just push it in and make sure that it's slid in and it's nice and tight. Okay, so that's our door station done. Room station, I should say. Our room station done. And we're going to do the same to our door station here now. So just can be a little bit fiddly from this one just because it's a right angle that we're getting around here. Okay. And just make sure that it's in again. Just give it a quick, small little tug just to make sure it's all nice and tight. Like so. Okay, so the next part that we need to actually do is connect these units to our network switch. Now, we're going to do that obviously using just short patch leads for this demo. Consider that when you're installing this in the field, obviously you're going to be using your own either pre-terminated long patch leads, or you're going to be terminating Cat5 or Cat6 yourself. Make sure that you terminate Cat5 or Cat6 yourself correctly, okay? So make sure you use the 568A or B wiring diagrams. Don't just do it in a rainbow pattern or something like that, otherwise you will run into problems. But in this case, like I said, I'm just going to be using patch leads, short patch leads. So the first short patch lead that I have here is going to be connected to our door station. And our door station is going to go into a power over Ethernet port on our switch here. And the second one is going to connect to our room station. They're a little bit long for this demo, so they're going to be looking a little bit gangly, but hopefully you'll be able to see exactly where we're plugging things in. Okay, so we're going to connect those two to power over Ethernet ports. As I mentioned, this is going to supply power and data to the devices in question, our door station and room station. Okay, so before we connect the router, okay, so I'm going to show you using a 4G router here, just because that's easier for our setup. Obviously, typically this would be either an ADSL or VDSL router for NBN, or possibly some other form of either cable router or fiber router, depending on your connection. In this case, it's just going to be a 4G router. Just be aware of the fact that, you know, we're just going to need internet access somehow. It doesn't need to be a static IP, it doesn't need to be any form of externally accessible IP for you to get external access, because we're going to be using P2P to configure, and we'll show you that in another video. But for now, I'm going to put the router aside because I'm just going to power up the switch, and we want to make sure that everything is working properly without the router involved before we install the router. Okay, so I've plugged that in there, and we've got power light here on our switch, as you can see, starting to flash, and shortly our devices will be supplied power and they will power up. So we'll just wait for that to happen. Okay, so you can just see, it's a little bit difficult given where that light is in there, but you can just see that they now have been supplied power, and shortly they'll start to boot up. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck these cables to the side here for now. Okay, so while those boot up, I'll just remind you of the setup that we've got here. So what we've done so far is we've connected our door station to our PoE switch and our indoor monitor, or our indoor station to our switch as well, and they've both gotten power. As I mentioned, we don't need to connect the 12 volts on either of these because they're getting power from the switch. And we're just going to verify that these two units can be made to function without the router being involved, because once we put the router in, we're going to have to change IP addresses, and you want to just make sure that everything's working before we do that. Okay, back here you can see that these are starting to boot up now. You're getting the welcome screen on this monitor here, and you can see the blue little light over here on our room station, our door station rather. Now, these devices, out of the box, the first time that they connect, they may take a little while to connect, so sort of up to 15 minutes if you've never plugged them together before. So one thing that you can actually do, a small trick that you can actually do to speed that up, is to go into our network settings and to toggle the device off and then back on again. So I'm just going to show you that now. So to enter our network settings, or our project settings, they're also known as, I'm going to hold down my finger on the settings section of this monitor until the password verification comes up. I'm going to enter the default password of 6/8. I'm going to go OK, and then I'm going to go to VTO set here. Now you'll see that the enable status is currently on. I'm going to toggle that to off, go OK. I'm going to toggle that back to on and go OK. And you'll notice now that if I go back home, these devices have been connected. You no longer have that little X next to the devices. That's only really for the first time that we're configuring this. That's the only time you're going to run into this issue. So if it does lose power down the track, it should connect pretty quickly. But the first time you plug these in, that may happen. So great. So let's just see if make sure that this is actually working. So I'm going to take the door station here, and I'm just going to push the door station button.
Calling now. Please wait.
And there we go. Looks like it's functioning as we'd expect. It's ringing. I'm just going to answer it to be sure. be aware there will be a little bit of feedback just because the devices are so close together. Hello, hello. Okay, it looks like that's working fine.
The call has
We'll hang that up. Okay, great. So that's the first step out of the way. We have at this point a door station and a monitor working quite well together. If we didn't need internet access and we weren't going to plug this into an external network, we could just leave this here and this would be working perfectly well. But in this situation, we want internet access. So we're going to add a router to the combination that we've got here now. So I'm just going to put those aside. Now, obviously in a house, typically your router's already plugged in, so I'm going to do that now. Plug in our router. As I mentioned, a 4G router, but in your situation, it's very likely to not be a 4G router. As it mentioned, it doesn't actually matter what it is. So I'm going to need another patch lead now. Another short patch lead. Again, this would be unlikely to be a short patch lead in your situation. You would probably need to be running a longer cable through the house, through a wall, through a roof, or wherever it is that you're running it. So I'm going to connect it to the uplink port of the switch here, and then I'm going to connect from there to one of the ports on the back of our router here. Just ensure that it's a LAN port and not a WAN port, because a number of routers are going to have WAN ports as well as LAN ports. And I'm going to leave that off to the side now. So essentially, we've made our connection to the router and we don't really have to think about the router anymore. As long as we know that it has internet access, that is all that we need. So the next step, unfortunately, you're going to run into situations where we're going to have to change IP addresses on devices to get them to match the router. Okay, you could change the IP on the router, but that's typically more difficult. So we're going to change the IP on the devices here. Now they're working perfectly well, so I know that everything's good, all the hardware's great. The only thing I need to now check or need to change is the IP addresses, and then I can verify that it's still functioning after I change the IP on the devices. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to need to do is change the IP on the monitor, and then I'm going to change the IP on the door station. Now, to change the IP on the door station, we're going to actually have to do it via the web interface. So we're going to need to use Internet Explorer, and that's where the laptop comes in that we were describing earlier. Okay. So, as I was saying before, the IP addresses that I'm going to set, 192.168.8.110 and 192.168.8.109 with 192.168.8.1 for the gateway. The reason why I'm setting these addresses, and you should be aware of how I came up with that, is because I need to set the addresses the same within the same network range as what's already on the network. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that now, how to work out what the network address range is on the network here now. So first thing you want to actually do, in Windows 10, it's a little bit different for Windows 7, but you should still be able to work it out from these instructions. So I'm going to right click on my network connection here and select Open Internet and Open Network and Internet Settings. And then from there, I'm going to select Change Adapter Options. And then from there, I'm going to go to the connection that's plugged in. Oops, it's actually not currently plugged into the router. Please make sure that you actually plugged your laptop into the router or into the switch. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to plug that into the switch. Okay, so we have connected to the switch, our laptop to the switch. So jumping back. Okay, now you can see that that is now connected. What I'm going to do is just double click on there, and it's going to tell me some information about the connection. And then I'm going to select Details. And in Details, it's actually going to tell me the IPv4 address that's been given to my laptop, assuming DHCP is active. And it's going to tell me my subnet mask. If you don't have DHCP turned on your laptop, very good idea to do it. If the DHCP is not turned on the router, then you're going to have to talk to the IT admin. But this will, assuming DHCP is active, this will tell you the IP range. So 192.168.8.100 is the address that's been assigned to my laptop. So therefore I know that the IP range is 192.168.8 and with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So the last digit can be anything, but the first three digits must match. And my gateway address, which is actually my router's IP address, is 192.168.8.1. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an indication of how to come up with the IP range that you must pick in order to get internet access. While you're there, it's also a good idea just to check to make sure that you are getting internet access. If that is the case, then great. If not, then you may have to look at other settings either on the router or on the PC. Like I said, maybe DHCP is not active. Okay, so that's great. So the first thing I'm going to change is the IP range on the monitor. Okay. So we're just going to wake the monitor up here. I'll zoom in slightly just to make this a bit easier to see. And I'm going to hold down my finger on the settings button again. And I'm going to wait. Okay. I'm going to enter the correct password of 6/8. And I'm going to go into network. And I'm going to go to wired IP. And then from wired IP, I'm going to change my local IP address to 192.168.8.109, as I mentioned before. My subnet mask I could probably leave, but I'm going to change it to match as well. So change your subnet mask to match. And we've already changed the gateway address here. So normally, obviously, you want to make sure that the gateway address is correct, as we described before, the local IP is correct, and that the subnet mask does match. Okay, so that's done there. The only other thing that we're going to need to change in here is the VTO settings, okay? The VTO being the door station. Okay, so we're going to have to change the door station in here as well. This is not changing the settings of the door station, okay? This is changing the settings on the monitor as it tries to connect to the door station. So it's going to try and now connect to 192.168.8.110, and we're going to have to change that as well. So I'm going to go OK, set successfully. Excellent. So now we're done with the monitor. So the next step is to change the door station, okay? So we've done the indoor station, or the indoor monitor, and then we're going to change the outdoor station. So for that, jumping back to a PC. Okay, so Internet Explorer is what we're going to need for this, and to do that, we're actually first, I should probably say first, we're going to need to change the IP address on our laptop to match that one that is currently on your door station. So I know this is a little bit long-winded, but bear with me. So in this case, we're going to have to change the IP address of our laptop. Sorry, I should probably go through that a bit to make it a little more clear. So as we were doing before, we're in here, we're into our network connection settings, okay? So just to go through that one more time. Right-click, open network and internet settings. Select change adapter options. Now this time, instead of double-clicking, I'm going to double-click and then I'm going to select properties this time. Okay, and I'm going to scroll all the way down until I find Internet Protocol version 4. Double-click. And then I'm going to set an IP address manually. Now, this address must be within the same network range as the old address, or the current address, I should say, on the door station, the one that we want to change. Okay, so 192.168.1.99, for instance, is what I'm going to set. It cannot be the same as the door station, but it must be within the same networking range. Okay, so assuming everything's set to like you've got units that are fresh out of the box, please just use this IP address. So 192.168.1.99, and leave the gateway address, or leave the gateway address empty, set the subnet mask to 255.255.255.0, and leave DNS empty. I'm going to go OK. I'm going to go OK again. And don't be alarmed by the fact that we now have no network access. That's fine. That's expected. So we're going to go close. Okay, now what we want is Internet Explorer. So as mentioned before, this must be Internet Explorer. No Chrome, no Firefox, no Edge. Must be Internet Explorer. And I'm going to enter the IP address of my device, or my door station. So 192.168.1.110, and enter. Great, so we've configured everything properly so far, and we can now access the door station on its current IP address, the one that we want to change. So I'm going to type in my username and password. By default, this is admin and then admin. We're going to change this a little bit later, but for now, that's what it is. So log in. Okay, so now we're in the door station's web interface. Now, there's a lot of things that you can change in here. For now, please only change what we are going to. So the first thing that we're going to do is network config. Okay, you will see that you've got wired and wireless on here. We're using the wired interface at the moment, so this is what we're going to change. So 192.168.1.110, we are going to change to 192.168.8.110. And we're going to just make the subnet mask match, even though we we could leave that the same, but we're going to make it match, and we're going to change the gateway address as well. Leave the DNS address unless you know that you need to change the DNS address, but by default this should work just fine. And select OK. Save succeeded, great. So that should be all we actually have to change on there. At this point, it's actually a very good idea to power cycle these devices. Okay, so once you power cycle them, they should come back up more easily. If you don't power cycle them, you will have to do that enable disable thing that we spoke about earlier. So I'm just going to power cycle them now. So as I mentioned before, zoom back out of there. So this is our switch where everything's powered from. I'm just going to unplug it, and I'm going to plug it back in. Not strictly necessary, but it will save you some headaches going forward. So we're just going to wait for that to come back up now. While we do that, let's just take another look at the instruction manual, just so we can see what we're doing next. So at this stage, what we've done, we've set our IP addresses as we wanted to. As I mentioned before, there are slight variations here. 192.168.8.110, 192.168.8.109, and obviously the gateway address changes also. Our room number is still the same as what it was before. Our VTO number is still the same as what it was before. We haven't touched those. They're the default numbers, okay? So we'll just jump to the next page. Now, this does kind of describe what I was going through before, okay? So as I mentioned, a lot of this is in the manual. It's a good idea to kind of go through it yourself. It should help you out if I've missed anything or if anything's unclear from this video, but yeah, just be aware that, as I mentioned before, our IP addresses are 192.168.8 rather than 192.168.1. Okay, so these devices have started to boot back up now. So our monitor's running here now, as you can see, and our door station's running as well. We'll just give it a little bit longer to boot. They will take a little bit longer to associate after you change the IP. We can do that same trick that we did earlier. Okay, so where we go, let's hold down the setting button again, and we're going to toggle the enable status to speed things up a bit. 6/8 and OK. And we're going to go to VTO set, select enable status to off. Select enable status to on. So I can just tap OK and tap home to bring us back out of there. And now you'll see that there's no X up the top, so that we know that we've set our IP addresses correctly and everything's running well. So we should just test this with a quick test call.
Calling now. Please wait a moment.
And we have video again. And I can answer that. And there will be a little bit of feedback again because they're very close together.
The call has ended.
But they are working properly. Excellent. Okay, great. Now that that's all done and we've verified that our door station and our room station are talking and everything's working well as it was before we did the IP change, we now need to do a couple more things. So the first one is we need to change the password on the door station. Okay, that's to prevent unauthorized access remotely, since in the next step we're actually going to put this on the internet. And particularly if you've got a door latch on the unit or a door strike set up on this door station here, which can unlock the door remotely via the app, you really want to make sure that the password is good. Okay, so to do that, we're actually again going to have to dive into the web interface for the door station. Now, before we do that, we're obviously going to have to change our laptop to the new IP that we had before, so we can just set it to DHCP. It's going to pick up an address from our router, which is in the same IP range as what we've just set our door station and our monitor to. And from there, we'll be able to change the password and then set it up for internet access. So let's jump across there now. So I'm just going to go back to our internet. Oops, nope, sorry. Before we do that, we want to come back into our network settings. So from that section that we're in before, we're going to go change adapter options. Okay, I should just show you how to get back into here again. So again, from the start menu, taskbar, select open network and internet settings. And from there, we're going to select change adapter options. And from here, we're going to select the internet or the interface that we're working with. Okay, you may only have one network interface in here, but obviously just because of the setup here, we have multiple. So the interface that you are actually connected to the door station with or to the switch with. Again, I'm going to scroll down to Internet Protocol version 4. And this time I'm just going to go back to obtain an IP address automatically and obtain DNS server address automatically. And select OK. OK again. I'm going to double click on here and just verify that I have internet access again, which I do. Great. So now I just need to go into Internet Explorer and go to the new IP address of the device, which we've already got up here. So 192.168.8.110 is the new IP of the door station. Excellent, so we can access it. So everything's working well so far. I'm going to enter my current username and password, so admin for the username and admin for the password. And we're going to change this username and password, or at least change the password for the admin device. So we're going to select user manager, and then we're going to select modify for admin. And change password. Now the old password is admin or ADMIN. And you're going to select a new password, which is both memorable and hard to guess. Okay? In this case, I'm going to choose something crazy like 11 VIP deck land. And I'm going to repeat that password, 11 VIP deck land. And you'll see that it's giving me a score down here for my password. Anything over middle will be fine. OK. Now once that's done, I'm going to select OK, and the password will have changed, and then it's going to log me out, and I'm going to be asked to log back in again. So I'm going to do that now. So my admin and my 11 VIP deck land, and log in. Great, so I know the password now, everything's good. Now what I'm going to have to do is change that password on the door station, on the room station I should say, because if you don't change the password on here, what's going to happen is your door station will no longer have access to your room station, or vice versa, your room station will no longer have access to your door station, and then nothing will work. So again, we're going to jump back into our project settings. So I'm going to hold down the settings button until we get the password verification prompt. Again, I'm going to select 6/8 for the password. And then I'm going to come down to VTO set. Now you can see that currently we have admin and we have a password. So we're going to change that password to 11 VIP DECKLAND. Tap away just to close the keyboard and select OK. Great. If you've gotten that password correct, you'll notice that you will not get a little X up the top here. If you get that password incorrect, you may notice that you've got an X up there. Just retype the password and click OK, and then hopefully it'll make everything go away. Okay, so now we're actually done. The only thing that's remaining is just giving you internet access via your phone. Okay, so we're going to do that in a future video. We're going to show you how to actually set it up on a phone in a future video. But what I'm going to do is show you how to get to the QR code for the device. And once we get to the QR code, I'd suggest that maybe you take a photo of the QR code so that you no longer have to go back into the web interface of the device to set it up on a phone if you're going to do it at a later date. So again, we're going to jump back to the web interface of the door station. And we're going to go to LAN config. Oops, sorry, not LAN config, network config. And from network config here, you'll see a little section called P2P. Click on that one. And you'll see a QR code. And hopefully it says online. If it does not say online, then there's a problem with internet access or with the IP range that we've chosen. But if you've done everything as we've described so far in this video, you won't have that problem, and it will say online. Now, there's a serial number here and a QR code. These are the two things that we're going to need, or at least one of these things we're going to need to set it up on a phone. Okay, so just take a note of the serial number, write down the serial number somewhere, take a photo of the QR code and serial number, just make sure that you have these details available to you, because it's these, along with the username and password that we set up earlier. Okay, so remember how I set the password for the admin username to be 11 VIP DECKLAND? You want to write down whatever the password was that you set, because you're going to use that to configure it on the phone in a later. Okay, great. So that's all working now. So just to recap, what we've done in this video is we've set up a simple VIP Vision Intercom system using a single door station and a single room station. We've then connected them using our Power over Ethernet switch, okay, using obviously Cat5 or Cat6 cable, and we've then connected that to our router for remote access via a phone. And we've taken note of the login details so that we can then configure that on a phone at a later date. Great, so hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully it's sort of shed some light on how you do the configuration of these intercoms in this configuration. This is probably the most popular or most common configuration, a single door station and a single room station. So if you can get your head around that, then it really bodes well for then adding more things down the track. So maybe I wanted to add more room stations or more door stations. Yeah, if you've got any questions, comments, please leave them below. If you enjoy videos like this or you want to see any more of them, please subscribe and like the video. And yeah, great. Thanks for watching.